Linda burst into the driveway, her car screeching to a halt as she ran into the house. Slamming the door behind her, she shouted at the top of her lungs, "Honey, pack your bags!" I won the lottery. Her husband's eyes widened in disbelief. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. What should I pack, beach stuff or mountain stuff? Linda smirked and replied, "Doesn't matter. Just get out." I was out walking with my 5-year-old daughter. She picked up something off the ground and started to put it into her mouth. I took the thing away from her and asked her not to do that. "Why?" she asked. "Because it's been on the ground and you don't know where it's been. It's dirty, and it probably has germs." At this point, my daughter looked at me with absolute admiration and asked, "Mom, how do you know all this stuff?" "You are so smart." I thought quickly and replied, "All moms know this stuff. It's on the mom test. You have to know it or they don't let you be a mom." We walked along in silence for 2 or 3 minutes, but she was evidently pondering this new information. "Oh, I get it," she beamed. "So if you don't pass the test, you have to be the dad." "Exactly," I said. A businessman was looking for a lawyer and decided to interview 3 candidates. At the first office, he asked, "I have an important question. How much is 2 plus 2? The lawyer replied confidently, 4. At the second lawyer's office, the businessman asked the same question. The lawyer pulled out a calculator, typed some numbers, and said, "According to my calculations, approximately 4. Finally, at the third lawyer's office, the businessman asked again. The lawyer leaned back, locked the door, and whispered, "How much do you want it to be?" A doctor and his wife were sunbathing on a beach when a well-endowed, beautiful, young blonde woman in a tight-fitting bikini strolled past. The woman looked at the doctor, smiled seductively, and said in a very sexy voice, "Hi there, handsome. How are you doing?" before wiggling her backside and walking off. "Who was that?" demanded the doctor's wife. Just a woman I met professionally," replied the doctor. "Oh, yeah?" snarled his wife. "In whose profession? Yours or hers?" A doctor just bought a villa on the French Riviera and ran into an old lawyer friend who lived nearby. They got to talking about how they both ended up retired in such a beautiful spot. The lawyer said, "Remember that office building I owned? It caught fire, and I retired here with the insurance money. What about you?" The doctor replied, "Oh, my Mississippi property flooded, and with the flood insurance money, here I am too." The lawyer laughed, then frowned. "That's amazing, but I'm confused about one thing. How do you start a flood?" 3 ladies were on a flight when suddenly the captain made an announcement. "Please prepare for a crash landing." The first lady, totally unfazed, started piling on all her jewelry. The other ladies, a little confused, asked, "Why are you doing that?" The first lady smiled and said, "Well, when they come to rescue us, I want them to see that I'm rich, so they'll save me first." The second lady, not one to be outdone, began removing her top and bra. The others blinked and asked, "Why?" She grinned and replied, "Well, when they come to rescue us, they'll see these great melons and rush to save me." The third lady, who was African, simply stripped down to nothing but her underwear, leaving the others stunned. They gasped, "Why are you doing that?" She shrugged and said, "Well, they always look for the black box first." A monocle walks into a bar and has a few drinks. Feeling good, he reaches for a cigarette, but the bartender says, "Sorry, no smoking in here. You'll have to step outside." The monocle hops off the stool and heads for the door. Just then, another monocle comes out of the bathroom. They bump into each other, fall to the floor, and get hopelessly tangled. The bartender shakes his head and shouts, "Hey! Quit making spectacles of yourselves." A boy's homework was to write down things his family said. He goes to his mom, who's on the phone. "Mom, can you help me with my homework?" "Shut up," she snaps. So he writes that down. He goes to his dad, who's watching football and yelling at the TV, "Hell yeah!" So he writes that down. Then he goes to his little sister, who's singing, "Lollipop, lollipop." He writes that down too. Finally, he goes to his little brother, who's running around screaming, "Done, done, 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 I'm Batman." Perfect. He writes that down. The next day at school, the teacher asks, "So what did your family say?" The boy proudly shouts, "Shut up!" The teacher gasps, "Do you want to go to the principal's office?" "Hell yeah!" At the principal's office, the principal asks, "What do you think you deserve for this behavior?" "Lollipop, lollipop!" The principal, furious, yells, "Who do you think you are?" The boy jumps on the desk and shouts, "Done, done, 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 Batman!" The photographer for a national magazine was assigned to get photos of a huge forest fire. Smoke at the scene was too thick to get any good shots, so he frantically called his home office to hire a plane. "It will be waiting for you at the airport," he was assured by his editor. As soon as he got to the small rural airport, sure enough, a plane was warming up near the runway. He jumped in with his equipment and yelled, "Let's go! Let's go!" The pilot swung the plane into the wind and soon they were in the air. "Fly over the north side of the fire," said the photographer, "and make 3 or 4 low-level passes." "Why?" asked the pilot. "Because I'm going to take pictures. I'm a photographer, and photographers take pictures." After a long pause, the pilot said, "You mean you're not the instructor?" Little Johnny, the kid who always keeps his teacher on her toes. In the 2nd grade, every morning starts with a fun guessing game. The teacher brings out a secret item hidden in a brown paper bag. Her goal? To help the class build critical thinking skills. Teacher: "All right, class. Today's secret item is smooth, round. It has a stem on top. And it's red." Johnny's hand shoots up. He knows the answer. But as usual, the teacher calls on another student. "Student Aijao, an apple." Teacher, smiling. "No, it's a tomato, but I like the way you're thinking." This happens every day. Johnny always knows the answer but never gets picked. And every time the teacher just likes the way they're thinking. Johnny, frustrated, whispering to himself, "Oh, I could totally win this thing." By Friday, Johnny's had enough. Before the game even starts, he stands up at his desk. Johnny, confidently, "Hold on, miss, I've got a secret item for you today." He reaches into his front pocket and feels around a bit. Johnny, smirking, "Okay, it's hard. It's round, and it's got a head on it." The classroom goes silent. The teacher's eyes widen in shock. Teacher, gasping, "Little Johnny, that's inappropriate." Johnny, grinning, "Nope, it's a quarter, but I like the way you're thinking." The Baltimore police, famous for their amazing K-9 unit, got quite a surprise recently. A blonde came home from work only to find her house broken into and everything stolen. She immediately called the police. The first to arrive was a K-9 officer walking up to the house with his dog on a leash. The blonde ran onto the porch, threw her hands in the air, and shouted, "Unbelievable! I come home to find my whole house robbed. I call the police for help, and what do they send me? A blind policeman?" My 4-year-old granddaughter asked, "Where does poo come from?" To make it simple, I said, "You just had breakfast?" "Yes," she replied. "Well, the food goes in your mouth down into your tummy. Our body takes all the good stuff it needs out of the food, and then what's left goes down to your bottom. And when you go to the toilet, that comes out as poo." She looked confused and stared at me in stunned silence for a few seconds. Then she asked, "And Tigger?" They pulled into Sleepy Bear Lodge at midnight. Neon flickering, the sign missing an E. Earl muttered, "This ain't a lodge. It's a crime scene with curtains." Inside, the bed creaked like it had war flashbacks. The wallpaper was peeling, the AC made ghost noises, and the bathroom light flickered like a horror film. Darlene plopped down with zero concern. "It's got character," she said, eating a vending machine burrito. Earl paced. "I survived Sturgis, Darlene. I didn't come this far to get murdered by mildew." She tossed him the room key. "Relax. You snore louder than the plumbing. No one's messing with us." Frank and Ethel had been married for 31 years, depending on who you asked. Every anniversary, without fail, Frank would say, "Hard to believe it's been 30 years. And Ethel would fire back, 31, Frank. 31. This year was no different. At breakfast, Frank handed her a card that said, "Happy 30th anniversary to my better half." Ethel looked at it, sighed, and said, "Well, I guess one of us has memory issues." Frank, chewing his toast, replied, "Actually, it's called selective remembering. Helps me survive." Later that afternoon, their daughter called. Ethel proudly said, "Can you believe it? 31 years married." Frank shouted from the background, "Technically, it's 30 years married and 1 year under protest." The daughter laughed. "You two are like a sitcom that never got canceled." Frank grinned and raised his coffee mug. "Darn right. And I'm still waiting for the finale twist, where I turn out to be right just once." Ethel patted his hand lovingly. "Keep waiting, dear." That'll be in season 52. A professor was riding a train when he noticed a farmer sitting beside him. To pass the time, the professor suggested a little wager. "I'll ask you a question. If you can't answer, you owe me $5. Then you ask me one. If I can't answer, I'll give you $500. Deal?" The farmer agreed. The professor began, "How many miles are there between the Earth and the Moon?" Without saying a word, the farmer handed him $5. Now it was the farmer's turn. He asked, "What creature has 3 legs going uphill, but 4 legs coming down?" The professor thought hard. He scribbled notes, tried formulas, and racked his brain. Finally, defeated, he gave the farmer $500. The farmer pocketed the money and leaned back for a nap. But the professor couldn't let it go. He nudged the farmer awake and asked, "So, what's the answer?" The farmer smiled, gave him $5, and went right back to sleep. A man was sound asleep with his wife when a knock came at the door. 3:30 in the morning. Grumbling, he went downstairs and opened the door to find a drunk guy swaying on the porch. "Hey, buddy, can you give me a push?" "Absolutely not," the man snapped. "It's the middle of the night," and slammed the door. Back in bed, his wife scolded him. "That wasn't nice. Remember when we broke down in the rain and someone helped us? You should do the same." Sighing, the husband got dressed, went back outside, and called out, "Hey, do you still need a push?" A voice replied, "Yeah, please." The man shouted, "Where are you?" The drunk yelled back, "Over here, on your swing set." An artist asked the gallery owner if anyone was interested in his paintings. The owner said, "Well, I've got good news and bad news." The artist asked for the good news first. "A man wanted to know if your work would go up in value after your death. When I said yes, he bought all 15 of your paintings." The artist beamed. "That's amazing." "So what's the bad news?" The owner replied, "That man was your doctor." A couple took in an 18-year-old girl as a lodger. One evening, she asked if she could take a bath. The woman of the house explained they didn't have a proper bathroom, but she could use the tin bath in front of the fire. "Monday's the best night," the woman added, when my husband's out at darts. The girl agreed, and the following Monday, the woman filled the tin bath for her. As the girl undressed, the woman noticed something surprising. She didn't have any pubic hair. Curious, the woman mentioned it to her husband later that night. He didn't believe her. "You're making that up," he said. "Well, next Monday, leave for darts a little early and watch from the garden. I'll leave a gap in the curtain so you can see for yourself," she suggested. The following Monday, as the girl prepared for her bath, the wife casually asked, "Do you shave?" "No," the girl replied. "I've just never grown hair down there." "Do you have any?" "Oh, plenty," said the woman, lifting her nightdress to show off her abundance. The girl, unbothered, finished her bath and went to bed. Later that night, when her husband returned, the wife asked, "Well? Did you see?" "I did," he replied. "But why on earth did you have to show her yours?" "What does it matter?" she said. "You've seen it plenty of times." "I know," he groaned, "but the dart team hadn't." A blind man walks into a bar and says to the bartender, "Give me a shot of your finest 30-year-old single malt." The bartender says, "You know that will cost you $100. It's pretty expensive." The blind man says, "Not a problem, I have the money and I know what I like." So the bartender, knowing the man is unable to see what he's pouring, serves him his cheapest single malt, a Glengarioch 5-year-old. The blind man takes a sip, makes a face, and spits it out, exclaiming, "That's 5-year-old whiskey. I said a 30-year-old single malt." The bartender apologizes and pours the man a shot of 12-year-old Macallan. The blind man takes a sip of that and spits it out again and says, "That's 12-year-old whiskey. I said 30-year-old." The bartender, still wanting to maximize his profit, pours another shot, this time a 21-year-old Glenlivet, and sets it in front of the blind man. Again, the man takes a sip, spits it out, and says, "That's 21-year-old whiskey. Give me what I ordered, or I am out of here." At this point, the bartender has resigned himself to the fact that the man won't accept anything less than the real thing, and pours him his best 30-year-old Balvenie. The blind man takes a sip and sighs, "Now that's 30-year-old whiskey." An old drunk down at the end of the bar who has been watching this whole exchange walks over to the blind man, sets a glass down in front of him and says, "Excuse me, sir. I'd like you to try this." The blind man says, "Happy to," and takes a sip. Immediately, the blind man spits it out and shouts, "My God, man! That tastes like piss." The old drunk replies, "It is. Tell me how old I am." A man and a woman were flirting on an overseas flight. She says to him, "Would you like to pirate?" He responds, "What's that mean?" To which she responds, "It's where you take me over international waters." He says, Not yet." She waits a little while, and the coastline of America comes into view out the plane's window. "Would you like to Coast Guard?" He says, "I'm not sure what you mean." To which she responds, "It's where you dominate me over our nation's waters." He says, Not yet." She waits a little and says, "When can we go get it on?" He responds, "See the Statue of Liberty? Let's wait 5 minutes after we pass that and I'll president you." She looks confused and asks, "What does that mean?" He looks at her and says, "That's when we over the country." A traveling salesman goes into a fairly grungy diner. The waitress comes over and she doesn't look too great herself. Deciding not to take any chances, the salesman orders 2 hamburgers and a hot dog. The waitress comes over a few minutes later with the hamburgers under her arms. The salesman says, "Why are the hamburgers under your arms?" The waitress says, "I'm keeping them warm." And the salesman says, "Cancel the hot dog." Ethan had a peculiar weakness for quirky gadgets, much to the dismay of his wife, Sophia, who had long given up on curbing his impulsive purchases. One evening, he strutted into their living room with a grin, wheeling in his latest find, a sleek humanoid robot. "Meet Maximus 3000, Ethan announced proudly. "It's a state-of-the-art lie detector." Sophia rolled her eyes, but said nothing. The real test, she thought, would come soon enough. At around 5:30 p.m., their 12-year-old daughter, Chloe, strolled into the house, over 2 hours past her usual time. "Chloe," Ethan said sharply, "why are you so late?" Chloe hesitated briefly, then replied, "I stayed after school with some friends to rehearse for the school play." Without a word, Maximus whirred to life, marched over to Chloe, and smacked her hard enough to knock her off the couch. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Chloe, Maximus can detect lies. Try again. Where were you?" Blushing, Chloe admitted, "Okay, fine. We went to Lily's house and hung out." "And what were you doing at Lily's?" Sophia pressed, suspicious. We studied for a quiz," Chloe stammered. Maximus sprang into action again, delivering another slap that sent Chloe reeling. Sobbing, she climbed back up. "All right, we watched Midnight Desires. I'm sorry." Ethan shook his head in disappointment. "Chloe, I can't believe this." "When I was your age, I never lied to my parents." No sooner had the words left his mouth than Maximus pivoted, zeroed in on Ethan, and landed a slap that nearly sent him over the coffee table. Sophia doubled over with laughter. "Oh, Ethan," she said through tears, "you had that coming. You've got no room to lecture her. She's your daughter, after all." Before Sophia could finish, Maximus turned, whirred ominously, and delivered a smack that left her sprawled on the floor. From his corner of the room, Ethan muttered, "Maybe Maximus came with a return policy." A stranded traveler found himself in a bit of a pickle when his car veered into a ditch in a remote area. Just as despair began to set in, a local farmer appeared, leading his powerful horse, Buddy. The farmer calmly hitched Buddy to the car and shouted, "Pull, Nellie, pull!" Buddy stood still. Undeterred, the farmer bellowed, "Pull, Buster, pull!" Buddy didn't budge. Again, the farmer cried, "Pull, Coco, pull!" Still, no movement. Finally, the farmer casually called out, "Pull, Buddy, pull!" With that, Buddy leaned into the harness and effortlessly hauled the car from the ditch. Grateful and intrigued, the traveler turned to the farmer. "Thank you!" "But I have to ask, why did you call Buddy by all those other names first?" The farmer chuckled and said, "Well, you see, Buddy's blind. If he thought he was pulling all on his own, he wouldn't even try." After a long and exhausting day, a young woman finally settled into her seat on the train, hoping for a peaceful ride home. She closed her eyes, ready to drift into some much-needed rest. But her hopes were quickly dashed by the man sitting next to her, who whipped out his phone and began speaking loudly enough for the entire train car to hear. "Hi, sweetheart. It's John. I'm on the train," he announced. "Yes, I know it's 6:30, not 4:30, but I had a long meeting." "No, honey, I wasn't with Kathy from accounts. I was with the boss, I swear." "You're the only one in my life." "Yes, I'm sure, dear." For a solid 15 minutes, the conversation dragged on, his voice dominating the space and testing the patience of everyone around him. Finally, the young woman had enough. She leaned in close to him, then spoke loudly into his phone. "John, darling, hang up and come back to bed already." The train car erupted into laughter, and John's face turned bright red. He hung up instantly, and from that day on, John never made another loud phone call in public. Two women had a wild girls' night out and got absolutely hammered. On the walk home, they both realized they had to pee right now. They spotted a graveyard and stumbled in. The first woman had nothing to wipe with, so she just used her panties and tossed them. The second didn't want to ruin her expensive underwear, so she grabbed a big ribbon from a funeral wreath and wiped with that. The next morning, the first woman's husband called the second woman's husband and said, "These girls' nights out have to stop. My wife came home with no panties." "That's nothing," the second husband said. "Mine came back with a sympathy card between her cheeks that said, 'From all of us at the fire station, we'll never forget you.'" It was pouring rain, and a large puddle had gathered outside an Irish pub. An old man stood by the puddle, holding a stick with a string dangling into the water, gently jiggling it up and down. A passing gentleman, curious and slightly amused, stopped to ask, "What are you doing?" "Fishing," the old man replied with a straight face. The gentleman chuckled to himself, thinking, "Poor old chap, he's lost it." Feeling a pang of pity, he invited the old man inside for a drink. As they sat in the warm pub, sipping their whiskey, the gentleman decided to humor him. "So," he asked with a smirk, "how many have you caught today?" The old man took a sip of his drink, smiled slyly, and said, "You're the eighth." An old biker stumbles into a bar, clearly drunk, and plops down on a stool with a loud belch. "Give me a drink!" He slurs at the bartender. The bartender, staying polite, replies, "Sir, I think you've had enough for the night." "I can't serve you, but I can call you a cab." The biker blinks in surprise, mutters something under his breath, and wobbles out the front door. A few minutes later, the same biker staggers in through the side door. He sways up to the bar and demands another drink. The bartender, now a bit more firm, says, "Sir, as I said before, I can't serve you. Let me call you a cab." The biker glares, grumbles louder this time, and stumbles out the side door. Not 5 minutes pass before the biker comes stumbling in through the back door, determined as ever. "All right, bartender," he says, slamming a hand on the counter, "just pour me a drink already." The bartender sighs and says, "Sir, this is the third time. You're drunk, and I've told you I can't serve you. Either let me call you a cab, or I'll have to involve the police." The biker stares at him, slack-jawed, then throws his hands in the air and cries, "How many bars do you work at, man?" A woman takes her lover home during the day while her husband is at work. Her 9-year-old son comes home unexpectedly, sees them, and hides in the bedroom cupboard to watch. Just after getting into bed, the woman's husband also comes home unexpectedly. She tells her lover to hide in the cupboard, not realizing that the little boy is in there. After a little while, the little boy says, "Dark in here." The man, who obviously got a real fright not expecting to hear anything, let alone from a little boy, says, "Yes, it is. Boy, I have a football." Man, "That's nice. Boy, want to buy it?" Manshole, "No thanks." Boy, "My dad's outside." Man, "Okay, how much?" Boy, 100 pounds. In the next few weeks, it happens again that the boy and the lover are in the cupboard together. Boy, "Dark in here." Man, "Yes, it is." Boy, "I have football boots." The lover, remembering the last time, asks the boy, "Okay, how much this time?" Boy, 500 pounds. Man, "Sold." A few days later, the boy's father says to the boy, "Grab your boots and football. Let's go outside and have a game of soccer." The boy says, "I can't. I sold my ball and boots." The father asks, "How much did you sell them for, and to who?" The boy says, "To a friend of mine for 600 pounds. The father says, "That's a terrible thing to do, overcharging your friend like that. That's 4 times what they cost when they were new. I'm going to take you to church and make you confess your terrible sin." They go to the church, and the father makes the little boy sit in the confession booth, and he closes the door. The boy says, "Dark in here." The priest says, "Don't start that crap again, you little toad. You're in my cupboard now." 4 women were relaxing in a sauna, each wrapped modestly in a towel. 2 were younger, 1 was middle-aged, and the last was a feisty senior citizen. Suddenly, a soft beeping sound filled the air. One of the younger women tapped her forearm, silencing it. The others looked at her, intrigued. "Oh," she explained, "that's my pager. I had a microchip implanted under my skin." Not long after, a melodic ringtone played. The second young woman casually raised her hand to her ear and started talking. When she finished, she smiled at their curious expressions. "That was my phone," she said. "It's integrated into a microchip in my hand." The middle-aged woman chuckled nervously, glancing at her towel as if it could magically grant her a high-tech upgrade. But before she could speak, the senior citizen got up and left the sauna. Moments later, she returned confidently, with a piece of toilet paper trailing conspicuously from her behind. The other 3 stared in stunned silence, eyebrows raised in confusion. Without missing a beat, the older woman smirked and said, "Well, would you look at that? I'm receiving a fax."